The Eagles are back in the Super Bowl. It only took 5 seasons for Philadelphia to go from the champions and rebuild almost an entire new roster and return to the big game. The Eagles went 13-3 in 2017 on the back of Carson Wentz and a dominant defense, and made it all the way to the Super Bowl despite having a backup quarterback, Nick Foles. The Doug Peterson Eagles beat the Patriots to win their first franchise Super Bowl. Philadelphia fell apart soon after, and Wentz was traded and Peterson was fired. The Eagles hired Nick Sirianni to be their next head coach and looked to Jalen Hurts to take the reins as the starting quarterback. And here the Eagles are, back in the Super Bowl this season.
But first, this video is brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook. The big game is finally here. Some people go to big game parties for the chili, others go for chips and dip. Only those in the know are there for the real action. Action that can only be found at DraftKings Sportsbook. We are teaming up with DraftKings to give all new customers a winning offer. All new users have to do is sign up for DraftKings using our promo code JDPROD, bet $5 on the big game, and get $200 in additional bonus bets. New customers just bet $5 on the big game and instantly get $200 in bonus bets added to your account. Wondering what you could use that $200 in bonus bets on? Try out same game parlays, where you can combine multiple bets from the same game, like which team will have the most passing yards and who will score the first touchdown, for even bigger winnings. If mobile sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still get in on the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use promo code JBPROD, bet $5 on the big game, and instantly get $200 in bonus bets. That's promo code JDPROD only at DraftKings Sportsbook. And thank you to DraftKings for sponsoring today's video.
The Eagles were the best team in the regular season for the majority of the year. Philadelphia finished 14-3 and was first in a very good NFC East division. The Eagles and Chiefs were the only two teams to win 14 games in the regular season, but there is a big caveat. Jalen Hurts missed 2 games. Gardner Minshew started while Hurts was out with a shoulder injury and lost both games, a 6-point loss to the Cowboys and a 10-point loss to the Saints. Hurts was out in week 16 and 17, but returned for week 18 and played well versus the Giants in a win. Philadelphia went 14-1 with Jalen Hurts playing. The only loss came to the Commanders in week 10, 32-21. That's the only game Hurts has lost all season heading into the Super Bowl. Washington somewhat found the single blueprint to beat Philadelphia. Don't let them have the ball. Washington milked the clock and tried to keep possession as long as possible. The Commanders have a very good defense, and the run game was good enough, and Taylor Heineke didn't do anything incredibly dumb, and the Eagles suffered their first L. The Eagles didn't have any crazy victories in the regular season outside of a blowout 24-7 victory over the Eagles in week 2. I know Minnesota has a bad defense, but the Eagles defense holding the Vikings to only 7 points is quite the feat. Philadelphia played 6 games in the regular season against playoff teams, including that Cowboys lost and Vikings win. The Eagles beat the Jaguars in week 4, but Jacksonville was bad at the time. Philadelphia also defeated Dallas in week 6, but Cooper Rush started. Honestly, we were completely robbed of a full strength Cowboys versus Eagles matchup, and that sucks. 2 of those 6 games came against the Giants. In week 14, Philadelphia beat New York 48-22, which was a very impressive win. Like I mentioned, they played again in week 18. It was a tune-up game for the Eagles, and they were trying to clinch the NFC East, but the Giants rested key players, and Davis Webb started at quarterback. The Eagles finished first in the NFC and had a first-round bye. The Giants ended up upsetting the Vikings in the wildcard round to set up a third meeting. I don't know if it was the Eagles in playoff mode or the Giants just simply being outgunned, but Philadelphia blasted them. It was one of the worst postseason games of the year. The Eagles dominated and jumped out to a 28-0 halftime lead before winning 38-7. In the NFC Championship, the Eagles hosted the second seed 49ers. I thought it was going to potentially be the best game of the postseason. Two teams with elite defenses against offenses with some insanely good playmakers, but we were completely robbed. Brock Purdy suffered a torn UCL. He was already the third string. Josh Johnson came into the game and ended up suffering a concussion. That left the 49ers without a quarterback and Purdy to essentially just come in and hand off the ball for the rest of the game. The Eagles won 31-7, but we never truly got to see what would have happened between the two without a key injury. The biggest face of the Eagles' success this season has been Jalen Hurts. He was a second-round pick in 2020, and there were a lot of questions of whether or not he could become a true NFL quarterback, and he shut up a lot of those questions. Last season was his first as the regular starter, and he was fine, but he's been great this season. Hurts passed for 3,700 yards and 22 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. He was a good passer, but what made him so lethal was his use in the run game. 760 yards and 13 touchdowns. The Eagles went all out and traded for A.J. Brown in the offseason from the Titans for a first and third round pick. That was a big time move, and it's paid off in a crazy way. Brown had nearly 1,500 yards and 11 touchdowns on the season, and Philadelphia already had a stud wide receiver, Devontae Smith. The Eagles selected him in the first round in 2021 to pair with Hurts, who he played with at Alabama. He had 1,200 yards this season. Now there are playmakers all over the Eagles offense. Tight end Dallas Goedert had 700 yards and 3 touchdowns, and running back Miles Sanders rushed for 1,200 yards and 11 touchdowns. Arguably the most important part of the Eagles offense has been the offensive line. Philadelphia had the best line in the league during the regular season, and it's filled with absolute studs. Jordan Mailata is an elite left tackle. Right tackle Lane Johnson didn't give up a single sack or hit all season, and Jason Kelce is still the man at center. The offense probably isn't even the best part of the Eagles roster, it's the defense. The front seven is the most important in my opinion. There are some serious dudes up there. In the interior, the Eagles drafted Jordan Davis in the first round this past draft. Javon Hargrave played well this season, and Fletcher Cox is still in Philadelphia too. Off the edge, Brandon Graham is one of the best of the best. He is amazing, and couple that with Hassan Riddick, who the Eagles signed to a 3-year, $45 million deal in the offseason, and Josh Sweat, and you have a nightmare pass rush. TJ Edwards was really good holding down the linebacker spot. Philadelphia had a good secondary, and a lot of that was because of two cornerbacks that were not on the roster last season, James Bradberry and CJ Gardner-Johnson. Bradberry was actually released by the Giants in the offseason. The Eagles signed him to a 1-year deal, and Philadelphia traded for Gardner-Johnson from the Saints right before the regular season. I think Nick Sirianni deserves a lot of credit for the way the Eagles have not only played, but been constructed. He does have probably the best roster in football, but these guys do fight for him. He gets fired up and seems like a really good leader, and it hasn't actually taken long for him to turn things around in Philadelphia. His first year as the Eagles head coach, they went 9-8 and did make the postseason. That left Philadelphia with some hope, and clearly it was warranted because the Eagles are playing in the Super Bowl only 5 years after their last appearance.
There is no doubt in my mind that the Philadelphia Eagles have been the best team in football this season, but that doesn't always mean that team wins the Super Bowl. We've seen it plenty of times, whether it was that 2007 Patriots team or that 2015 Carolina Panthers team. Just because you're the best doesn't always mean you win. That being said, I do think the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl. As a Commanders fan, I certainly hope that is not the case. I will be rooting extremely hard for Kansas City, but at the end of the day, I do think that the Eagles are just a much better team. I do think
think the key of the game is going to be whether or not the Eagles' pass rush can get to Patrick Mahomes. I think the health of Patrick Mahomes is also another big question. It sounds like he's getting closer to 100%, which does make sense with an injury timeline from a high ankle sprain. So I think he will be probably running the ball, but maybe not as much as we've grown accustomed to. The key to beating the Chiefs probably is going to be just getting to Patrick Mahomes. We saw a few years back when the Buccaneers did beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. The key of the game was the pass rush and then getting to Patrick Mahomes. Now that was a very different situation. Kansas City was very banged up on the line, and for the most part, it was just backups there. This season, the Chiefs have had one of the best offensive lines in football, and for the most part, they're healthy. So that is going to be a tall task for the Eagles, but luckily for Philadelphia, that pass rush is historically good. On the other side of the ball, I think it's pretty much the exact same thing. Can the Chiefs pass rush Chris Jones, Frank Clark? Can they get to Jalen Hurts? Jalen Hurts has had the luxury this season of playing behind literally the best offensive line in football by quite a big margin. And I think if you can maybe rattle him or get to him and even just disrupt his flow in some way or his rhythm, I do think the Chiefs will be able to stop him. The only game that he has lost all season was versus Washington, and that was the big thing that the Commanders did, was make sure that pass rush was going after Jalen Hurts, making him uncomfortable, and more importantly, Washington wanted to kill clock and just keep the ball and run it. I don't think the Chiefs will do that. When you have Patrick Mahomes, you can do whatever you want, but I am still picking Philadelphia to win the game. Like I said, I really hope that's not the case. I'm an NFC East guy, and all I want is for most of those teams to fail. I'm glad the Cowboys aren't in the Super Bowl. That's the one big thing that I could take with me, even if the Eagles win it all. But at the end of the day, I do fear and very, very strongly believe that Philadelphia will win their second franchise Super Bowl, and second in only 5 years.